You're listening to episode 24 of the Animus podcast. I'm Aftermath 1231, and this is a weekly Assassin's Creed focused podcast where we talk about basically every single thing that's related to Assassin's Creed ever. By my math, this is the episode which marks 6 months of doing this, but my math is probably wrong. As usual, I'm joined by Aries.
Hello, friends. I, too, have a pretty sweet microphone.
And I'm also joined by McCracken.
Hey guys, I've got this microphone for a couple more weeks.
And then our very special guest this week is the man with many skills, the least of which, speaking like a goddamn sexy beast, Turul.
Hey, I don't have a cool microphone, so that's cool.
We won't hold it against you, Turul.
Yeah.
Today we're going to talk about a bunch of different things, especially Turul Turul's like magnificent in basically every way, and we'll talk a little bit about that.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
And then we're going to move on and talk about some of the other news that happened this week, and a special, some special set of news that came out this week, which was all very interesting. Then we're going to talk a bit about the weekly discussion thread and some other things. But before we get to that, I just have 2 points that I'd like to talk about that are not related to Assassin's Creed. And if you don't care about anything besides Assassin's Creed, then you can just skip ahead, thanks to the timestamps, which are in the description. So this week, Everybody's Gone to the Rapture came out, and it has been like a massive debacle, and I am loving it, because I'm learning so much about game design, and where people go wrong with game design. It's incredibly entertaining, watching. Basically, there's the people who thinks it's like all abstract and artsy-fartsy and all super interesting, and there's people who just think it's like boring and stuff, and then there's like the people in between who understand what it really is, and it's like, it's really neither. It falters on both accounts, and I just think that's like, it's super interesting. I'm learning all about where that went wrong, and where other quote-unquote walking simulators went right. I've been having a ton of fun reading all about that, reading lots of reviews, and watching YouTube videos all about that topic.
For those of us who don't know, mainly me right now, what is Everyone's Gone to the Rapture? Because I've seen a lot of videos about it, but I don't exactly know what it really
Everybody's Gone to the Rapture is
There's like no one there, right?
First-person exploration game.
Wow, why won't anyone let me? This is my topic. Go on down, guys. It's called a walking simulator. Like if you think about Gone Home.
I was going to say like a shittier version of Gone Home. It sounds like.
It is a walking simulator. Like that's not necessarily meant as like a slight. It's more of just actually a very accurate description of what you do.
Yeah, it's turned into that.
Around, right?
Yeah.
This in particular, like, you are apparently really slow walking around, and there's like a sprint
so
what
that
it
goes
is.
only marginally faster and takes 7 seconds to build up.
Yeah.
It's a game where you are basically in the 80s, and you're in this small British village, and basically everyone has disappeared, and you need to follow these glowy little objects around, and then when you get close to one, then these glowy objects turn to like outlines of people, and the outlines talk to each other, and so it's supposed to be you like following and like listening to people's stories, and so it's less about the mystery of where everybody's gone, and it's more about finding out the story of this small town. And it kind of falters in that a few ways, and that it assumes that you're automatically going to care about all these characters. And of course there's the whole running thing where there's most of these walking simulators have some kind of run, so you can move at a fair enough speed, so that people who don't like to walk around doing basically nothing don't have to. Well, in Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, you walk incredibly slowly by default, and no reviewers noticed that there was a run button, because when you hold down the run button, it only speeds you up a teeny tiny bit, and there's also like this acceleration, like
so like it doesn't
fast.
register for like a few seconds.
Yeah,
and the problem was this is a problem I deal with all the time at work, is they didn't give an affordance. So basically what happened was they didn't tell anybody at any point how this run mechanic works, and they didn't teach it at all. And that was probably just an oversight. Like they put out something like, "Oh yeah, we screwed up. We we meant to put something in there, but we didn't. So what happened was, as a result of this poor communication, was that everyone had to explore and had to figure out how that works instead of being taught how to do it. So, like, something that is that minor has actually, like, in some game reviews has made that game much worse than they would have given it if they knew about this run mechanic.
This game especially also had an extensive marketing campaign, so a lot of people were definitely looking forward to this because it was definitely marketed as some kind of like abstract and as it was supposed to be like a mystery thriller. And there's two things that this game gets right and which showcased off in the marketing, and that's the graphics. It's an incredibly beautiful game, and the sound. It sounds amazing. The music and all the sound effects are just so great. But it just falters in the gameplay for the most part. Do you understand a little bit now about what we're talking about, Aries?
Yep, I got it.
All right. Another thing that happened this week that I just want to speak on real quick is the Black Ops 3 beta came out. And last night it actually just went open, so you don't need a code or pre-order or anything like that.
Oh, you don't?
Nope. It's open today and tomorrow as well, so if you want to go try that out.
Oh, sick, I gotta do that.
I can blops to my heart's content.
Yeah,
Yes.
I want the guy with the robot arms and has the spikes.
Yeah.
And when he jumps, he goes, "Aah!" and he stabs.
And so I was playing a bit of that last night, and some of you may know that I was a COD kid for several years until, like, Ghosts, because I never bought Ghosts because that looked like it was going to be fucking shit.
Xenophobic pile of shit.
Yeah, and the games have gone kind of stale up to that point, and now I was playing Black Ops 3, I decided to check it out, even though it does take up, like, 1/5 of my PS4 hard drive space, because it's, like, fucking 15 gig for a fucking beta.
Jesus.
And I was playing that, and it's a ton of fucking fun. Which surprised me. I didn't expect that. And, like, I'm feeling a bit nostalgic because, like, the COD community is exactly where it was when I left it 3 years ago. Like, people
Everyone's still 13.
Exactly.
And banging your mom. Is that what's
and
happening?
people are, like, drop-shotting. I don't know if you guys have heard that term before.
Is that where you dolphin dive or something like that?
Yeah, it's where you, like,
Basically.
when you're
Dolphin
shooting
dive.
someone, like, two people are shooting, and then one guy, like, drops to the floor into his
Yeah.
prone position, so that it's difficult, because you have to, like, you'll be shooting at his chest, and suddenly his hitbox is way down on the floor, and so that gives the guy who ducked down a chance to shoot you, and it's considered, like, a cheap move, like camping and things like that, and, like,
Yeah.
I'm remembering, and people are still doing that stuff, and it's crazy. I love it a lot. It's great to be back, even if it's just for a little bit. And I was considering buying this game since I really like the transhumanism story they're going for at the moment. That has been shown off in different trailers and interviews in the main story. And if the multiplayer sounded fun, then I was considering getting it, and it's really fun. So I think I might get it. And like, one thing, I have one issue actually. They really put a massive emphasis on movement. And meaning that you have this little jetpack, so you can go like do quite a big jump. But your legs are jelly. It's like the steel your legs are made out of are just jelly, because he gets hurt and like whines every single time I land from a massive jump, and it's kind of annoying. Like, I don't die or anything, but it's like he just like goes ugh every single time I land from a jump, and it's like, mate, chill out. We've done this like
He used to be a
16
tennis
times.
player.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Two things, though. I always kind of thought of Call of Duty as like Assassin's Creed's Ghost of Christmas Future, but I guess it's nice that, like you said, COD Blops Trace is sort of bringing it back. But also, I think the one problem with Black Ops 3 is no Kevin Spacey. That's the selling point for me. No Spacey, no buy. That's my hard rule.
Yeah.
Did you guys like, what was like the first COD game that you guys played?
None of them.
Modern Warfare 2.
Modern Warfare 2? Okay.
I
Because
would have played World at War a decent amount, but
okay.
Well, I never owned any, but I played.
Yeah.
I played a lot of World at War at my friend's or my cousin's house in Scotland once.
So like, Modern Warfare 1 caused, like, it created the first person online thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so
I had a lot of fun.
that was something that like kind of created this whole entire like a gaming culture, I guess. And it was an amazing game. Like, that game was amazing. Like me and my buddies, we literally went home every day after school and would just play that for hours and hours, and then every release since has never lived up to that original one. But so like they had Modern Warfare 1 and their series went down for a bit. Like at World at War was just fine. Then like Modern Warfare 2 and 3 were actually just not very good at all. 3 was pretty terrible. But they seem to figure out how to like kind of fix it. I mean, I guess most people hated Ghost. But they somehow, I don't know, they've got their swag back, I guess.
They're also sort of converging with Titanfall because, some of you may know that team split from Call of Duty at around
that was the
Modern Warfare.
Yeah, Modern Warfare 4.
Mark.
So, that's why everyone was super excited about Titanfall because they knew it was like it was the same dudes doing the.
That made the first Modern Warfare that were good at Call of Duty. Yeah,
but obviously that game kind of came and went.
Yeah, it was surprisingly quick. It was like a good couple months it was there and then just gone. Yep. But I like how they're incorporating. I mean, obviously they had a lot of the same ideas when these guys split to make Respawn Entertainment, but the emphasis on mobility I really like because after a certain point, like gadgets and new guns, and it's always the FAMAS, that's the best one. But when you add mobility, it really makes one game different from the rest because if you showed me, Modern Warfare 1 to Ghosts, I honestly probably without seeing the graphics couldn't tell you what the difference between any of them is. But with Advanced Warfare and now Modern Black Ops 3, you can really see a difference just in how the game plays, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys follow Giant Bomb at all, but Jeff Gerstmann, he's a really like a big fan of the Call of Duty series, and he actually put Advanced Warfare as his like #1 last year. And he talks all the time about if Call of Duty ever went back to without its like new movement mechanics, that no one would like those games would be bad and no one would be interested in playing them. So they've kind of like put themselves in a corner, but they've still made the games better at the same time.
I haven't played Advanced Warfare, but playing around with the movement in Black Ops 3 is a ton of fun, and I like that they put an emphasis on continuing to be able to shoot. Like when you're swimming, because you're like half robot, you swim super fast and you can jump super high if you want to, and you can like. One thing that's annoying is that they got rid of the dolphin dive, which is disappointing, but they replaced it with this cool slide mechanic, and you can wall run basically as far as you want. It's and so you can actually like wall run from one side of the map to the other, and it adds a lot to the game, and I've been really, really enjoying playing around with that. What's up?
Yeah.
Oh, so I saw the trailer in a YouTube ad for the 1920s zombies thing, and that was really cool.
Yeah,
that I really liked.
One thing, I've always been a massive fan of Treyarch's games, even if I haven't played World at War, and especially the zombies. I was a massive zombies guy. Like, I think my top round that I ever got to was 51. So if you talk to anyone, you might know that that's not the easiest thing to do.
It's because you're so MLG Pro Aftermath.
Oh yeah, exactly. That was actually higher than all my friends. It took me like because the rounds go longer and longer as they go on. It took me like half a day to do it, like taking breaks and stuff. But I was just like sitting in a party chat on Xbox on my 360, and like my friends would like drop in and out of the party chat, talking to me like the whole day, just dropping in and out. It was a ton of fun actually. So yeah, I'm really liking Black Ops 3, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the reviews are like before I check it out. But I think there's actually depending on a lot of other games coming out at the end of the year, depending on my status with the other ones, like Fallout 4 and things like that, I might get this, and I might play the fucking shit out of it.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, this is like the thing I was going to say. These first-person shooters have all turned into like the same game. Like Halo 5 looks very similar to Destiny. Destiny looks very similar to Call of Duty. Call of Duty looks very similar to like Titanfall. So, like, I want to play Call of Duty, but I'll probably be playing the Taken King, and so, like, I don't see why I would get both games or even have time for both. But
I've actually been looking into getting Destiny after the Taken King because it looks like I don't have it at the moment.
Yeah.
And it looks like Taken King is going to bring a lot of improvements to the base game and actually fixing a lot of things that I had, a lot of issues I had with the game.
Did you guys,
have you? Yeah. Oh yeah, Nolan North. Yeah, Desmond. Yay.
Oh, boo, Drake.
Have you guys played MMOs before at all?
I'm not a big fan of them.
I did.
I had a World of
that?
Warcraft
Okay.
phase in middle school, but that's about it.
So if you don't like MMOs, you probably won't like Destiny. Like, it's not an MMO, but it has a lot of the same mechanics and a lot of the faults that MMOs have. So, just fair warning.
All right. Aries, I know that you wanted to speak on something before we
Yeah,
went on to the
last
AC.
thing in the intro before we actually get to the real stuff is just last week I got myself a shiny new coat from the folks over at Volante Design, who, for those of you who recall, a couple of years back when this one guy drew up a picture for a real-life Connor Kenway jacket, the internet was like, oh my god, that's so freaking sweet. He's been making more coats, cool stuff. The one I got is called the Washington. It's essentially a sort of vaguely colonialish looking military type jacket, which is really sweet. It's in brown and gray. Very well made. For those of you who like Assassin's Creed looking clothing and want to get some of that stuff in real life, I would highly recommend running over to his website, volantedesign.us, and checking his stuff out, because honestly, it's all pretty much just obscenely good quality. I think it's all handmade. Fits really well, looks great, and I'm very satisfied with it. So do yourself a favor and get yourself one of those coats, because hot damn, they're good.
How much do they cost?
They're different depending
These
on which
things are
one.
like, oh,
Yeah, it's not something you can buy a lot. This
let's
one
see.
was
Yeah,
$300.
Oh, baby.
And I'm
so,
not. I won't be eating for a while after this, but like, man, that coat's gonna. I mean, you can tell they're really well made, so that will last you years and years and years.
yeah. So for those of you guys that don't have $300 to put on a jacket, I'd recommend Ubi Workshop. They put out really good stuff. I've bought a couple
Yes,
items.
they also put out fantastic things.
Yeah, they're
They
a little more. They're a little expensive, but nothing in this price range.
Great T-shirts. UB Workshop guys are on their T-shirt game.
Yep.
All right. I think it's time that we should get into the AC and we should get started. Now, Turul, you're actually the first guest to technically be on the podcast 3 times. The first time was on the E3 episode where you were on for like 5 minutes or something. The second time you were on the special mod episode where these two couldn't make it, and so it was just all the mods. I suggest that everyone go listen to both of those episodes to hear a little bit more about Turul and his interests and all that. But first, let's just... I don't know how much we focused on that last time, because I actually forgot to listen to it like I was supposed to. But Turul, could you tell us a bit about how you got into the AC games from the beginning?
Yeah, we did talk about it. I'll just do like a TLDR. Saw AC1 on E3, thought it looked super awesome, played it, didn't beat it, didn't think that was that great. Got AC2, was amazing. The ending I thought was hilarious and bad. I thought Aliens in Assassin's Creed was super dumb. Didn't get Brotherhood when it came out, but eventually played it. Was just as amazing as 2, but then that's when the modern day actually clicked for me. So I was like, yes, this is awesome. That's when I started going on the forums. Yeah, so I guess that's a quick thing. And then played all the other ones. And here we are.
And so how'd you get into the online community? Can you give us another summary for that one?
Yes. Okay. So after Brotherhood, like when Lucy got stabbed, everyone was freaking out, including me, and I wanted to figure out like, what the hell is going on? Like, why did he stab her? I don't get this. Like, what? So I went on the forums, and then that's when I found out that Lucy was a Templar, because by that time the DLC had already come out, and so I just thought it was super crazy, and like the twist was really interesting, and I didn't expect it at all. And so I went on and went on the forums a lot and went through the wiki and tried to learn as much as I can about go backtrack about the modern day and try and figure everything out before AC3 released. And then right around that time was when I found Reddit. I found Reddit through so Total Biscuit. He talked about Reddit, the game subreddit, a lot because he said it was a pretty good place for discussion. So I went on there, and I didn't really know what Reddit was. I had seen it before. I had seen other subreddits, but I didn't really understand it. So once I realized there were other categories, like other subjects for subreddits, I was like, I bet AC has one. I wonder what theirs is like. And I went on there, and eventually I just stopped going to the forums because I was spending too much time on the subreddit. And eventually, they were opening up mod positions, and that's I just applied because I had a particular set of skills.
And could you tell us a little bit about what are those skills and what you do as a mod on the AC sub?
Well, particular set of skills. I know Taekwondo. I'm a sharpshooter.
You actually defend
300 confirmed kills
from. You actually defend the subreddit from potential invaders from the forums.
My daughter keeps getting kidnapped about 3 or 4 times, and they make the same movie every time.
Yep.
But it's just as good as the last one. No. So my skill set is artist,
very particular
designer. Yeah. I don't know. Like, what do you want to know? I guess. Like,
what does your average day look like when you're looking at the subreddit? Do you and like, I know that you sometimes get feedback, and recently you actually got a very specific set of feedback, and you actually dealt with that. So, what do you do normally? Do you like check out and come up with ideas for new banners and things like that, or do you work with Flash on the CSS and stuff?
Yeah, so when I first came on as a mod, one of the first things I wanted to do was like redesign the subreddit, because I didn't think it looked great. It was kind of carrying over this like mid 2000s like 3D skeuomorphic like look, and it just looked kind of dated, and it didn't remind me of AC. So one of the first things I wanted to do was like make it look more like the Animus, or make it look more like one of those Animus type interfaces. And so what I did was in Photoshop, I pretty much kind of just made a what's called a mock-up, and I made it look like this is how I want the subreddit to look. And then I sent that to Flash because he knows all of the CSS. I really don't. It's not something that I went to school for or anything. I'm semi-familiar with it, but he's like the magician. He's the one that makes it all happen.
Yeah.
And so from there, we just kind of went back and forth, like, okay, make this change, and we got to a place that we're pretty happy with. I still don't think it's like perfect, or it still could use some improvements, but yeah, that gives you an idea about that.
It's a constant work. You're constantly improving.
Right? Yeah,
constantly changing it.
Yeah, design's never finished, right? Like you always have to just put out something. Like what do they say about games? Games are never done; they're released.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it is. But making banner changes and stuff like that, those usually are made in response to something occurring. Like maybe we have an event, or something about the AC universe has changed, or a game has been announced. Like when there's leaks happen, sometimes we'll put up like a special banner to like kind of get people excited about that. Or there was a while where we had Evie Fry only on our banner because it was a reflection of the community. Like we really, really like Evie, and we wish we could see more of her. And just stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I do most of my work in Photoshop. Yeah, so.
For all our listeners, if you listened to last episode, you probably know by now that Turul also does all the art for the podcast. So, Turul, could you tell us a bit about how you made this all look so sexy, and how you hooked us up with this beautiful stuff out of the generosity of your own heart? You didn't take a commission or anything like that. You just did it because you're a nice guy.
Like when people see this stuff, they like you guys have said, like you guys are really impressed by it. But I'm going to be honest, a lot of the work I do is pretty quick. It's just I have a small amount of free time, and I'll take a couple shots at it. And so it's not perfect, or I'm hoping to put out my best work, but sometimes it always isn't. But what was the question again? How do I make it?
About the podcast art? How do you make it? And,
so I basically start with is the Animus Island, and so I started brainstorming about what type of visuals made me think of Animus Island, or what type of mood, or what type of thing that Animus Island is about. And so there's a lot of really great, what I'm really big fan of and wish I was better at was doing concept art, but there's a lot of really great concept art of Animus Island, of like in game. And so there was a lot of great stuff to pull from there. And so I found, some concept art, and then I manipulated in Photoshop to make it slightly different. Maybe there's some color changes or there's some stylization to it to make it a little more different than the original piece. But all credit goes to those guys for the whoever's been putting out the concept art at Ubisoft. That stuff's just great. And then I kind of take visual elements that I see in the game and things like you see the thin lines that are inside of like the White Room, or the thin text that's within a rectangle, or things like that. And so I thought Revelations had a really cool like UI design. Like its overall like style was really awesome. I thought it was like one of the best of the series, and so I thought that would work pretty well for Animus Island, and I kind of made a version of that and put that together for Animus Island. Came up with a pretty simple logo.
Very sexy logo.
Yeah, so.
And just to reiterate, you didn't do any of this for money. You did it because you're a fucking nice guy, and we all appreciate that very much.
Like, yeah, I like doing it. Like there will be times where I'll just have an idea for something, or I just feel like being creative and I just do it. Like when I was a kid, if I wanted to do something, I would just draw. Like I would just get out paper and pencils and draw something. I would draw video game characters and stuff like that. But now I just do it because I just think it's fun, and I feel pretty lucky that I have an interest that I've made into a job and I can do for fun.
Yeah, it's great. One last question before we get to some community questions. Now, this is actually a new one that we're asking all of our guests, and it's a bit abstract, so I'll explain to you if nothing immediately comes to mind. But we'd like to know, what has AC done for you? How has it changed you? Like, for example, our last guest, AC made her take more of an interest in history, for as an example. So does anything come to mind in that regard?
Man, I don't want to like sound like AC's changed my life. Like, this series has made me into the man I am today. That's not really what it is, but like I feel like there's a lot of there's a lot of great lessons in the narrative, and like even outside of the game, it's taught me to work with other people and to be to not like be afraid of trying to put myself out there, or as Joker always says, do a thing.
Yep.
But like the series itself has taught me about being mindful of different points of view and being respectful to other people that you might necessarily agree with. It's taught me about how morality exists, and that it's not always so kind of simple and kind of, as everyone always says, black and white. But it's taught me that things are usually a lot more complicated and a lot more nuanced than they first appear.
That's all very great to hear, Turul.
That's exactly the answer I was hoping to get from that question. Thank you, Turul.
Yeah, but yeah, there's a lot of other cool stuff. Like, I don't know, just the aspects that some of the character has are inspirational and stuff like that. So
now we have a few questions from the community. First off, Kawaii Wizard, who you may recognize as the person who made What If Assassin's Creed Unity was really French, and What If Assassin's Creed 2 was really Italian. And he'd like to know,
the best.
What advice can you provide to those making the transition from traditional to digital art? How do they compare?
So traditional and digital art aren't actually that different. Digital art just usually allows you to do things a lot faster. I can't remember his name right now, but one of one of the designers that are that you learn about in school said the computer does not make you a designer, a better designer. It's more like a microwave. So the old school way to designing, you baked with an oven, and the new school is a microwave. So so the tools are actually pretty complicated, and they allow you to do a lot more than you would in the traditional space. But you have to be mindful of not allowing the tools to work for you. You have to work, and the tools are they're tool. That's all they are. They're just tools. They allow you to do things. And so to put all of the responsibility on their tools, it doesn't make your work better. It just makes it more complicated or more flashy. The question was
how do traditional and digital art compare? And what advice can you provide to those making the transition from traditional to digital?
The second part of that is when I was transferring, or before I transferred, I was actually kind of scared of it. I was like afraid to like try Photoshop and to try Illustrator or to try new online programs because I thought they would be too complicated or I wouldn't ever figure it out or it would be just too much work. And I thought I could just make my paper and pencil work for me. But really don't follow that line of thinking. Don't let any of these things scare you. Don't be like, oh, I don't have the proficiency to do this, so I'm just not going to do it. I just go back to what Joker says, just do a thing. Like, if you want to do it, just try it. Even if you think you're going to be bad at it, just do it. Don't let things scare you or keep you from trying.
That's exactly how this podcast came to be.
Yeah. So, like what you put out, it might suck, but you just got to keep working at it. So. And it's fun. It's fun. It's not scary. It's fun.
Now we have another question coming from Talking Sandwich. I bet you can probably tell what it's going to be. And he asks, how does one do dank Photoshop wizardry?
Let's see. You get a filter that like makes you like really high contrast with a lot of saturation. And then you get a lens flare. Mm-hmm. And then you get some sort of meme figure, and then you make a GIF out of it.
Of course, it's pretty rare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't see that very often on YouTube.
That's pretty much how it works.
Yep. All right, Turul, where can everyone find you? And if they want, are you taking commissions at the moment? Can someone contact you about getting some art made?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm open to that. Sometimes my schedule doesn't allow it, or I'll have to be like, hey, I can't do this right now, or it'll take me a while. But yeah, I'm open for commissions all the time. You can reach me at Twitter at, what is it? AC_Turul. I don't even know my own Twitter. I also have a DeviantArt page, AC Turul. Yeah, those are probably the best ways to contact me if you're interested.
And where most of our listeners may know you on Reddit is reddit.com/u/Turul9.
Yep.
And I believe that's it.
Yep.
So thank you for coming
all
on.
You need to know about art and design.
Yep.
You are ready to go out and get a job now.
Yeah, you don't need anything else. All of the information in one place.
You're welcome, everyone.
Remember what Shia taught you. Yesterday you said tomorrow, so just do it.
Yeah, don't let your dreams be memes.
This week we had another episode of the official Assassin's Creed podcast, the network podcast. You know, see it only once in a blue moon. But
it was previously known as the network podcast when it was still an Initiates podcast. Now it's just called the AC podcast.
I think it still comes up as the network podcast.
On the links it does, but it's not called that anymore.
Yeah,
iTunes
okay.
And stuff.
And we learned things about Evie in the story. We learned a little bit about how collectibles are going to work. And mostly we learned a bit more about the relationship between Evie and her brother, and their different perspectives on the situation in London with the Templars.
Yeah, so Gabe and Esco sat down with, I believe her name's Siri Young, at Tough Love Muse, basically everywhere, one of the writers in charge of Evie's character, and they talked a bit about lots of different things, including like Evie's motivations and Evie's relationships, and how we'll play as Evie in the open world, including how her collectibles are going to function and how they're supposed to like work similar to the feathers in AC2, so they're actually going to be relevant instead of just random floating tricolor cockades.
Yeah. The thing I really like about that is that it points to, with Evie having different collectibles, like you said, Aftermath, there's a story significance in there, hopefully. B, it does differentiate the two and how they play in the open world between Jacob and Evie. But also, it gets back to when we were talking with Loomer many podcast episodes ago, about how the games justify and explain things and why collectibles are in the game. I feel like this may be hinting at us getting back to that a little bit more overall. And to preface this, I haven't actually listened to the podcast yet, but Call 96 column from the ones who came before posted a great write-up on the Assassin's Creed subreddit, which is what I'm looking at right now. But anyway, yes, this one little piece of information that Evie has her own collectibles is very encouraging to me.
Collectibles which unlock a cutscene once you collect each one.
Which is even better.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, they explain it so it's similar to the feathers in AC2, and not only does it have actual story significance instead of being random things that aren't ever explained, but it also actually progresses a story in a kind of way. So in AC2, you're collecting feathers to comfort your grieving mother, and in this game we'll be collecting some unknown collectible to further some other kind of story, which we don't quite know just yet.
I like that we have this promise that we'll have these collectibles that provide you with narrative, and I like that they're like the feathers in that way. I kind of hope they're not like the feathers in that there's a
billion of them
just all over the place. Yeah, like especially with Unity, I realized like I prefer like a couple collectibles that you have to interact with, like to get this collectible you
like
have to do like the glyphs, especially because playing through AC2, I'd rather have like a few robust collectibles than just a ton of go here, stand in this place.
I definitely think we'll talk about that subject on the podcast at another time, because I think that we could get a full discussion out of it, but I definitely agree with you. So we've got quite a bit of new info here from it. I'll just run through it a bit real quick, including I'd recommend actually listening to the podcast itself to hear it from their own words, but and to learn a bit more, because we're not going to cover everything in this one, and it's only half an hour long, so I definitely recommend checking that out. So one thing I don't know how I feel about this, but Queen Victoria will not be a major figure. I can't speak, I'm sorry. Queen Victoria is not a major figure in this time period because she is mourning her husband, Albert.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I guess, a famous figure we won't be seeing much of. On the other hand, like, they didn't say she's not a major figure in the game. They just say she's not a major figure in the time period. I don't know. There are probably interesting ways they could play her secluded character if they wanted to.
Secret meetings. Maybe we're the one who killed Albert. I don't actually know what he died of, but
I don't think I'm looking that up.
It probably happened before, actually. That's never mind. Forget that I said that.
Died in. That's not
the reason she's all solitudinous is because Albert died. So
solitudinous
as a new word.
I can appreciate that. It seems that the Templars have been in power in London it's actually not a recent development. It's actually been
a century
in power in London for a century, and we know that they've been in power for a very long time because in the AC Unity novel we get a glimpse into the Templar power in London. I won't spoil that because it's a fucking amazing novel and you should go read it.
I mean, also we see that the Templars have a lot of control over London because when Haytham in AC3 is doing his stuff, like, you get the feel that the Templars kind of have that city under control.
One thing I think, like, considering that we have this entrenched power in the Templars this time around, I think I'm going to make a prediction right now that the Templars are probably more along the lines of probably not as extreme as, but similar to Cesare Borgia, where they're just a fun villain rather than black and white. And I think you would have an excuse for that because they're so entrenched and used to power and probably,
And I think that they're looking for Pieces of Eden kind of supports that because they're looking for the Pieces of Eden to further their own power, especially Lucy Thorne, who seems almost mad and obsessed with that idea.
Yeah, she's like going after the shroud,
yep.
which like heals people.
Yeah.
But can like also kill you.
Yeah, it's a little bit crazy.
Yeah, it's
like apparently Lucy Thorne also has a journal where she knows. They set the location of every piece of Eden, but I don't know how true that is because that's like the most. If so, that journal is the most important thing in the AC universe.
And one of only 12 devices that shows you where all of the Piece of Eden are.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of those. What was I going to say?
By the way, that king dude, he died in... Or maybe it wasn't a king, but the Albert guy died in 1861.
Never mind then.
Diagnosed with typhoid fever.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. I remember that now, actually.
Yes.
I remember now. I was going to say to McCrackenway, your point about what kind of Templars we're going to be seeing. I think that since this is branded as the first modern AC game, and the Templars we sort of know use capitalism as their means of acquiring power, I feel like we'll see the Templars here played a lot more like the modern Abstergo Templars than the kind of stabby Renaissance Templars.
They might also show up as I don't know about sneaky stabby, but
they won't be that. I'm saying.
Yeah. I don't think there'll be sneaky stabby either. I do think that you can still. I don't know. I think they might play it evil capitalist, kind of like Andrew Carnegie or the robber barons in America. I think. I don't know. That's just my thought because it seems like an entrenched power is going to have. They're going to like being in power, and that might just be more what they're interested in than changing things. They just want to chill, have parties and stuff.
We also learned a bit about the Fry family, including that Jacob and Evie's Fry, that the Fry's father is named Ethan, which is interesting. And we also know a bit more about Evie's relationship with these various characters. The twins have very, very different relationships with their father. Perhaps, here's a guess, but Ethan's more strict with the assassin code, and Evie kind of aligns with that for him, while Jacob doesn't really have an interest in that.
Yeah.
And we also learned that Evie has a focus on the Evie has a focus on the pieces of Eden and is trying to find them for the Templars, while Jacob doesn't actually believe in the pieces of Eden and that they exist, which is a little interesting.
I think I'm actually more interested in him now knowing that than I was before.
Yeah, that relationships, definitely sounds more interesting.
Yeah, it seems like don't care about the pieces, give me London.
Yeah, so this actually makes me think, with this new info, that maybe we know that we're going to play as the twins when they leave Crawley and go to London, and perhaps Crawley will be like a Syndicate's version of Versailles, and wasn't ACU.
Except not as with fancy palaces.
Well, yeah, you couldn't even go to the fancy palaces in the open world.
There's a ACU. Fancy palace you can go to in the open world in ACU, just not Versailles.
And I think in that perhaps we'll see them as children as well, just like in ACU where we see Elise and Arno, and perhaps we'll see some of their training and some of their interactions with their father, because we know their father is killed, and then they go to London.
Did they say when his father was killed?
Not yet.
Not yet.
So
in the first mission of the game,
since they're raised by since these two are raised by assassins, I don't think that he's going to be killed when they're kids. I think that maybe his death.
Tell that to Arno.
A few years earlier will prompt them to go to London.
Okay.
What else do we have here? Evie is older than Jacob, and since they're twins, they also say
a whole 12 seconds.
They say that that's also supposed to be relevant information, because someone actually, Fred, asked why the fuck doesn't it matter who is older, because they're both twins, and Esco seems to believe that it does in fact matter who is older, even if it's by a minute. Evie has a extensive notebook that she keeps. It focuses on her search for pieces of Eden, and it also gives us small glimpses into her relationship with Henry and Jacob, and I think any other characters in the game. But it's not focused on that, so it'll just be...
I mean, it's written as like a notebook about her findings as far as the pieces of Eden.
Dear diary.
Yeah, and if she interacts with Henry and Jacob during that search, then it'll also be included, and we can read that.
I like that.
notebook.
It's dynamic.
And I hope that we can actually like hold the notebook in her hands and like flip through the pages instead of like
Uncharted. I'd love
That's
that.
what I was thinking.
Instead of like just looking at a Helix menu, because
I bet you like a lot of money that's going to be in Helix menu.
Yeah,
It'd be way easier
I want to believe
just shove it
Turul.
in there for them.
Let me have this.
I know. I'm sorry. I don't want to lie to you guys. I don't want to lie.
of course. I believe, and the AC community team are also working on getting various bloopers and outtakes from the mocap sessions because apparently
They're hilarious.
they were supposed to be a ton of fun.
What was the one from Rogue? That one was so good.
With it was on Loomer's podcast with Stephen Piovasan when Captain Cook is like, Shay, are you working for some bigger organization? And Shay and Gist look at each other and they're just staring there in silence for 10 seconds and they're like, wow! And just start doing that for a minute. And Cook is like, what the hell are you on about? It's really funny because they have it in the mocap, so they actually animate their reactions with the character models. It's really funny.
Maybe AC should just move in that direction of just being like this hilarious kind of self-aware, like screw the seriousness of this conspiracy, just like make it into a big joke. That'd be hilarious.
Make a great DLC, I tell you.
That'd be hilarious.
Excuse me. I think that was basically everything that was covered in the podcast. I definitely recommend everyone go listen to it for yourselves. You can find that on Twitter, and you can find that basically everywhere. Search either Assassin's Creed Podcast or search the Network Podcast, and you'll find that. Anything else you guys want to talk about the that episode of the podcast?
Not a ton. I mean, I thought it was interesting that like they say that the main body of the assassins, it sounds like it's not gone. They're just really placid and not really doing anything effective. And I think it's
it kind of
interesting
sounds
the way
like the American assassins. I guess just one thing I would say is I think my like prediction for the conflict between Evie and Jacob is going to be around. There's probably going to be instances where Evie, they have to choose between, saving people of London or making the lives of people of London better, or going after a piece of Eden. And so I assume Jacob will see Evie as not caring about people at the time, or she only cares about these pieces of Eden. But Evie sees it as she's caring about everyone, and she needs to. Getting this piece of Eden is a necessary step in freeing people of London. So
I totally agree, which is why y'all should go read my theory about how Jacob and Evie are gonna fight. Not fight, but be mad at each other. Squabble, yes.
Yeah, so you all should go listen to that episode of the podcast. Wow. It was great. The guest was fun, and she was active on Twitter and stuff. And yeah, you should go check that out. Go check that out and mention that you were sent there from Amazon Podcast.
This week's weekly discussion thread is all about Assassinations. So this will have spoilers for all the games, but if you're listening to this podcast, you probably played them, so what am I even on about? I'll read the post that Aftermath put up. They're one of the most iconic and necessary parts of the franchise. Like Old Faithful, if it isn't the beginning of the game or the end, they'll be there when it's time to wrap up the sequence. We've had many iterations of the assassination mission, from the bare bones and dynamic missions of AC1 to the mostly open, mostly dynamic, and mostly player-controlled black box missions of ACU. What do you think of these core pillars of the franchise? Which game did them best, worst? Is there an assassination which stands out to you? I, just last night, was playing the Bonfire of the Vanity sequence from AC2, which is probably my favorite overall memory sequence because it's just one assassination after the other. And although it's sort of the AC2 style where you don't have a lot of options, it's just kind of jump on the guy and stab him. There's not a lot of dynamic stuff going on. You're pretty much constrained to one or two approaches. I really liked it just because there's a lot of assassination missions back to back. And I loved going back to Florence and seeing all that stuff and taking out Savonarola's guys one by one in the way that an assassin really should. So those are my favorite assassination missions, probably overall, in terms of like one sequence of them. But if I had to pick one specific assassination mission, I probably couldn't because I can't think of one right now.
I really enjoyed the style they went for with ACU, and I'm glad to see they're improving upon that and expanding upon that with AC Syndicate. While ACU I don't think did them quite best, but I definitely think it was a step in the right direction, and I'm glad to see that Syndicate is definitely taking another step, perhaps taking 10 steps in that direction as well. So I'm actually very pleased to see that. I really enjoyed Unity's assassination missions overall. If they had like a game that was like $5 and just those, I'd probably play it a lot. I really liked it. AC2s, of course, stand out because AC2 is amazing in most ways.
The best characters, I think, the best targets were in AC2.
Yeah. Assassin's Creed 3 stand out to me a little bit. Assassin's Creed 4s were the most unique, I think, because they were all quite different, if I remember correctly. Like, there was that one with the two guys, and you had to, like...
Burgess and Cockrum.
Yeah.
Pull up your socks and grab your cocks. The ship is sailing. Best line in that entire game.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Turul, I know you have some thoughts on the black box mission idea. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think this kind of black box is... The whole idea of the black box is what I thought was really cool about AC, like the series all along, and what I think like they should have been doing or have been trying to do for the past, I don't know how long this series has been going on, but I think the approach that Unity had for the assassinations was like the best approach, maybe not in terms of execution. I really liked I think it was the first one where you go into the Notre Dame, and there are so many pathways to get to it. So a lot of people think that it becomes too easy, but to me, it's more about figuring out the puzzle that is really interesting, and that puzzle can be solved in multiple ways. So there's even chances for replayability. So, what I think. When I think about which game did them the worst, I think AC3, because there was AC3 was very like strict about like its level design. There were usually like there was really only one way to do the mission if you wanted to be stealthy, and one way to do the mission if you just wanted to run in guns blazing. And like the stealth in that game was very touchy, and so if you made one tiny mistake, or what usually happened was the controls led you to making an unintended mistake, you would lose like your like you would become noticed by guards, or you would now be on a path that you can no longer take the mission as stealthy. So I remember just being incredibly frustrated by that game's assassinations. And there was a lot of like scripted things, like the way Charles Lee ends was just like, to me, kind of disappointing. Like it ended with this like really bad chase through a boat on fire, and then then you follow him later and he dies inside of a bar. So yeah, I just remember that being really poor. But I think what Syndicate is doing really well is it's taking the good foundation that ACU had, and kind of getting back to what made AC2 and ACB so special about being able to just do things in different ways and give the player some creative opportunities.
Yeah, it's all very interesting. I'm glad to see that we're going more into that direction. I'm really enjoying it. I'm definitely looking forward to Syndicate in that regard. I think it's going to be very great.
Yeah, it's kind of it's now that I think about it, it seems very similar to, I don't know if you guys know much about the Metal Gear series, but their newest one, AC or MGS5, is super open ended. You can choose what time of day you go, like who you bring with you, what tools you want to bring, like you can approach that mission in any way you like. And I think Syndicate is doing something a little more streamlined than that. So it's a little less kind of overwhelming, but it still gives you that same sense of creativity and problem solving. So,
Yeah. McCrackenway, do you have a favorite game for Assassinations?
It's probably kind of a toss up between I don't know, like the three ACs that I think do Assassinations really well are 1, Unity, and 2, but for different reasons. Like, I really like 1 where you get a setup for the game plan before you go into the mission. So, you get like maps and things that help you form a plan so that when you go into the mission, you have this idea in your head of what you're going to do and how you're going to get through there. But in that one, kind of the mechanics are a little wonky, so like it's not as easy to execute a nice plan. But then Assassin's Creed 2 is really cool because they're very strongly narrative assassinations. You go straight into them, like you have one path of what to do, you do it because that's what the narrative requires. But ACU is probably the one where I feel like the missions themselves are really good in like letting you form your own plan and then giving you the tools to execute that plan. Just because I think the mechanics are a lot more refined since AC1.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Missions that I really liked because of the narrative association with it is Edward and Ben Hornigold. Because Edward has to kill him, and then he's like, "You threw in with the very kind we once hated," and you can tell he's really having a hard time with it. Also, for a similar reason, all of the assassinations Shay does once he becomes a Templar in AC Rogue, especially Hope, was particularly because you could tell Shay was having a really hard time with that. So I thought for a character building kind of perspective, AC Rogue had some really great assassinations.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to go over another history topic here. I'm going to go over the general topic first, and then we'll talk a bit about how Assassin's Creed could fit into that. And so today we're going to be talking a bit about the Punic Wars, which were a series of wars, a series of 3 wars between the cities of Rome and Carthage. And these are a massively big deal in the general scheme of world history, especially if you're either living in North America, South America, Central America, or Europe, then you owe a lot to these wars. So I'm going to leave some extra things in the description, some extra resources where you can read a little bit more about it, because I'm not going to go too in-depth with this, and just to give you a bit of a general overlook of the wars, and some of the more interesting parts of them, and then we'll move on to why AC would be a good fit. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about this, and Aries is going to back me up with some facts all about Rome. So, first, I'll try and paint a picture of the era for you. The year is like 264 BC, so Rome's still thoroughly a republic, not at the heights of its Caesar era, when it was an empire. At the moment, Rome controls basically the entire Italian peninsula, all the way up until you get to things like Milan and Romagna, where the tribes still control. And then we have the city, which you may have not heard of before. It's called Carthage, which is straight across the pond. It's in basically modern-day Tunisia, and it controls basically all of North Africa until you get to Egypt. And so there's these two massive superpowers that, for them, because now you may need to remember that the average person at this time the average Italian farmer has probably, unless they're extremely well-traveled, they've never left the Italian peninsula before, or even gone much beyond that. And so to these guys, the Mediterranean is the entire extent of their entire world. No one has seen anything past this, for the most part. And so we have these two superpowers that are going to fight over ultimate control of the Mediterranean, and eventually, to them, ultimate control of their entire world. And these were a massive series of wars that, to give you into scale, there were at one point there were a total of 1 million soldiers involved. The next time that there would be 1 million soldiers involved in a war is 1,900 years later, in the 1600s, when Britain was campaigning throughout everywhere. So these are kind of a slight big deal. We start off with a bit of a rebel rousing in Sicily, which was controlled by Carthage at this point, and it's right next to the Italian peninsula, so you can probably understand why Rome might be interested in some of the trade ports there, because it's kind of a big deal in terms of trade across the Mediterranean. We have some mercenaries going about doing silly things, because at the time, while Rome has citizens that serve in the army, Carthage has more of a focus on trade, and so they actually focus more on having mercenaries instead of like a standing army. And so at one point, some mercenaries do some silly things. They, in Carthaginian-controlled Carthage, they sack the town because they're bored, and then they get Carthaginian support for some reason, and then they eventually then backstab Carthage and decide to get Roman support instead, and this eventually leads into the First Punic War. Basically, what happened is that there's a bit of a back and forth. This is actually the first time that Rome ever assembles a navy, and one story goes that they actually had no idea how to build warships, and so they actually just had to copy and wrote down the plans of a Carthaginian ship which washed ashore, which I think is all very, very funny.
Although, really, they would have had Greek ships, too. Triremes existed long before then, so come on.
Yeah, they most likely had some knowledge of it, but they don't have, like, a standing navy at this point, because they...
True, yeah,
you know,
yeah, but they would have seen boats before.
Yeah, they would have seen them, but they probably didn't know how to build them, though, you know? So they probably faced off with people who had them, but they never needed them, because at the time, Rome's only been expanding throughout the Italian peninsula, and not anywhere else, because they've only... And so they have a really good army, but the navy's a bit lacking. And so basically, how the First Punic War goes is... So the First Punic War is basically a violent raping of Carthage, and they get beaten the shit out of them, and they have to pay a ton of money and like massive reparations. And now, as you might imagine, this causes a bit of an issue, because when all of their mercenaries get back, they then don't have any money to pay the mercenaries. And so this is where a man named Hamilcar Barca comes into play. He was tearing shit up in Sicily during the war. He's a Carthaginian general and leading his mercenaries. And basically, to him, he should have won the war, because the Carthaginian army was mostly really good, and they were tearing crap up in Sicily at the time. And so when he gets back to... the mercenaries decide that they don't like Carthage anymore because they're not getting paid. He has to go ahead and deal with that, because Carthage is all like, what do we do, Hamilcar? And so then he gets another band of mercenaries, and this time pays them up front, and basically stops that whole ordeal, and decides that the best way to get Carthage out of this bind is to expand into Iberia. And for anyone who doesn't know, Iberia is the peninsula with Spain and Portugal. And this is long before them. And so he decides to expand into there using his new mercenaries, and to go to the silver mines and to try and encroach upon Roman territory in Europe.
If I may, also, one of the reasons he went to Iberia instead of going directly to Rome is to sail to Rome, via Sicily, essentially, failed so horribly for them the first time that they wanted to use their war elephants for a land invasion from the north, which Rome would not have expected. Mm-hmm. So they actually put their elephants on giant wooden rafts and ferried them across the Straits of Gibraltar to Iberia.
So this is
carry on after
this
that.
Is just before the Second Punic War, and so Hamilcar is campaigning throughout Iberia, and when Rome's all like, "Hey guys, what are you guys doing over there?" Hamilcar basically responds, "Oh, we're campaigning to get the money we owe you." And they really couldn't argue with that, so Rome went back to Rome and sat there while Hamilcar became more and more powerful. And over the several years that they were campaigning here, his mercenaries turned from just random, disloyal mercenaries into soldiers that were loyal to the Carthaginian purpose, to the Carthaginian goal. And so slowly he's actually creating a very, very powerful army. Now, one thing we need to remember, just before he leaves for Iberia the first time, he actually makes his son, both of his sons, Hasdrubal and Hannibal, swear a blood oath to never be a friend to Rome. And this comes in, and it becomes very important later on. So Hamilcar is campaigning up in Iberia, and eventually then he's doing all that, and eventually he gets killed. It's very, very fuzzy how he gets killed. We're not really all that sure, but it was probably quite unceremoniously. Could be assassins, Ares. And so by this point, Hannibal, his young son, is now quite old, and he decides to become a general himself. And basically, if I'm remembering right, the first thing he does is that he hates the shit out of Rome and decides that he needs to go fucking stab Rome in the face. Would that be right, Ares, do you think?
Yeah, so the process of stabbing Rome in the face was a bit complicated because they had basically an entry into the Italian peninsula via the Piedmont region and all the northy bits, like you said, Milan and Romagna, that general area. They came down through there, and they basically, the Second Punic War involved an up and down along the coast, both coasts of Italy, just burning everything and sacking all of the... Okay, fine.
Yeah, you're jumping a little bit ahead, though. I was just... so basically, Hannibal goes to the upper regions of Iberia to the extent of Carthaginian control and decides to... basically, there was this treaty, which is one of the things Hamilcar organized between Rome, and there was this river, and they said that this is where Carthaginian control ends and Roman starts, and today we don't actually know where that river is because we don't speak the same language, and that was lost to history. And so Hannibal decides to cross the river because he's a fucking badass, and decides to tear the shit up out of this Roman-controlled city, the furthest Western Roman-controlled city. And at the time, Rome's actually a bit busy in the Balkans fighting another war, so they don't actually come to that city's aid. And if they had, perhaps the Second Punic War would have never really gotten off the ground. But Rome doesn't go to their aid. Instead, Hannibal gets free reign, basically, and he keeps going north. He keeps going east through France, and then they expect him to come through this along the coast, where what would make the most sense, and so Rome gets all set up there. But he doesn't do that. Instead, he does something that had never been heard of before, and he decides to take all of his supplies, all of his soldiers, and basically everyone, and crosses the Alps. Now, you may have heard of Hannibal crossing the Alps before, because this is one of the greatest military strategic events in history, and it's incredibly ballsy. And he does it, and it catches Rome by surprise. And basically, when they first encounter Rome, there's some small skirmishes along the way, and Hannibal faces some small tribes up in the Alps and things like that, and loses 76,000 men, bringing him down to...
But also, keep in mind, he had elephants, which don't exactly practice mountain climbing early in their youth, so about 90% of his war elephants all died.
Yeah. And they had mules and things like that they would often fall off the snowy cliffs. And keep in mind, this is actually in September that he's doing this, and crossing the Alps, especially in the beginning of winter, was super dangerous. So now let me paint you a picture here. Now, this is the first time that he comes into battle with the Romans in Roman territory. Now, it's a foggy winter morning, okay? these Italian farmers and other Italian soldiers are all standing in line, waiting. They've had tons of practice. They know exactly what they're expecting. They're expecting Carthaginian army to line up and expecting a full brawl. But that's not what they see. They see instead, out of the distance, they see this lumbering, gigantic creature, white tusks glistening, a distended snout, and a horn noise that crosses the countryside. And they freak the fuck out. Because Carthage had war elephants, as you mentioned, Ares, and that's kind of a slightly big deal since Rome had never ever seen war elephants before. They'd never seen elephants at all. No one had even heard of elephants. Unless you were incredibly well-traveled or a very, very powerful merchant. You'd probably never seen something like this before. And so most of the Romans actually turn and run the fuck away because they have like spears and small swords, and perfect for like hand-to-hand fighting, but not perfect for gigantic mythical creatures that are coming straight for you, which I think is just fucking crazy. So Hannibal, in short, Hannibal basically fucks the Romans up and basically goes down, and as you said, Ares, he goes up and down the Italian peninsula, fucking Rome up. But Rome has a saying, the war isn't over until you surrender, and Hannibal makes one mistake. He doesn't go for Rome. He was confident that he couldn't actually take down the massive Roman walls, so he never actually goes for the city itself. He just destroys basically every single settlement up the countryside, and there's the Roman army just following him along, restoring settlements as they go.
Well, it wasn't exactly completely like that. There were some instances of, like you said, the Romans never, you don't lose until you surrender. There was a battle at Cannae in, I think it was the year 216, according to this little picture here. I have no idea. But that was when I think the number was 100,000 Roman soldiers died in a single day. And Rome was like, well, that's no reason to give up. Let's keep fighting.
Yep.
So they did, because they're freaking nuts.
Yeah, it's a little bit insane. And so Rome, after a lot of finagling and Rome pulling together its best soldiers and various other blood feuds and revenge plots that happen throughout the story, some other generals decide to attack. Instead of attacking Hannibal, they instead attack in the French region. They attack Carthage in Iberia. Eventually they get around to attacking Carthage in the desert and North Africa, where they're from. And this actually makes Carthage recall Hannibal back from the front line in Roman-controlled Italy. And he's actually, all of his life's work is all dismantled right there in front of him when he is called back and has to face Rome head-on in North Africa. And
which is really ballsy of Rome to send all of their army, basically. Like, well, we're going to leave Rome right now and hope that they're going to quit when they see that we're just destroying Carthage.
Yeah.
So this is this is a war marked by a complete ballsiness on both sides, which is, I think, very crazy to think about.
And so, basically, Rome wins, and they basically completely fuck up Carthage, and Carthage is now basically completely crippled, and they lose, I think, all of their Iberian holdings, for the most part.
Oh, yeah, they took all of that.
Yeah. And so Rome's expanding, and then I believe Hannibal, is he killed in this? I don't remember.
Let me see.
Rome just screws up Carthage, and basically then comes along, a little while later, comes the Third Punic War, which basically just involves Roman leaders being like, you know what, I don't like Carthage very much, and going there and destroying the city completely. And now
just finished the job.
You can't find Carthage on a map. While Rome is one of the largest European cities, Carthage is nowhere to be found. And perhaps Carthaginian would have been the basis for all the European languages if they'd won, or perhaps the US Senate wouldn't be named after the Roman government style if Carthage had won. Perhaps all these massive things would be different.
Hannibal survived the Second Punic War.
Oh, yeah. And so, in a way, how hopefully you see why these wars were so massive, because this was when Rome first became a world power, and went from becoming just another Mediterranean power to becoming the world power. And then, eventually, because of this war, Rome is basically free to do whatever the fuck they want from now on, and because of that, we have so many Roman and Latin influences in our culture today, and it's massively important. So now, let's talk a bit about AC again.
Oh, right, that.
Yeah.
After that detour.
Yeah. Now, here's why I think this would be a great, actually, story of AC. There's so much, like, there's all this politics and things that they can fall back on. There's blood, oaths, and revenges, and people's revenge plots left and right, and war elephants. Like, come on. And for cities, I think both Rome and Carthage actually had architectural masterpieces. Like,
Carthage is a beautiful city. There's some artist renderings based on some descriptions that we have in the Aeneid, but oh man.
Yeah. At the time, Rome had the Colosseum, which was a massive architectural masterpiece, and Carthage had...
Nope, that did not exist until way later.
Really,
because
actually?
I saw... built that in the 100-something, I think it was 172.
That's interesting.
Which I covered in one of my videos on Roman history.
I saw artist depictions of Carthage v. Rome, and they showed off the Colosseum, but I guess not. But... still, points still stands. Rome had some beautiful fucking architecture. It's still amazing, even if they didn't have some of the larger monuments which were brought in by the Caesars. Rome was still an amazing city, and Carthage, Carthage even had the larger, more impressive monument in their massive fucking harbor. That was
it's got like this boat thing.
Yeah,
it's like a
look it up. The harbor is absolutely beautiful. Unbelievable. And Aftermath, to your point, they wouldn't have had the Colosseum, but they sure as hell had arenas dotted all over town. So yeah, Rome would still look like Rome to you.
Yeah. And I think, like, a lot of people, when they talk about wanting to go to Rome, they want to go to the Caesar era. They want to visit the empire, and at the height of its power. And I think that this would actually just be more interesting because we have these two amazing cities instead of just one, which I think Ubisoft could probably handle. And we have all these interesting things going on and all this interesting politics, and we could probably like be with Hannibal while he's crossing the Alps would be a great set piece. And so maybe it would be more interesting if you were actually a Carthaginian, and then maybe a Carthaginian assassin, and then you cross with Hannibal into Italian territory, and while he goes off campaigning across Italy, you actually just scale the walls into Rome, and you climb in, and then you basically explore Rome and attempt to take it out from the inside out. But that obviously doesn't go too well for you.
I think a neat way to handle the world design of a game like this would be, obviously, like you said, Aftermath, you have your two main cities, Carthage and Rome, a couple little towns dotted here and there, but this would be a great way to essentially have the entire Italian peninsula, North Africa, and the Iberian Peninsula, obviously in a sort of diminished form, because you can't just have a world that big. It just doesn't work, because that's pretty much all the Mediterranean. But you could have, obviously, certain pieces, sort of like how AC handles it. You have the Romagna countryside, the Tuscan countryside, and then your main cities. But you'd have to have, if you're following the build-up to the Second Punic War, you'd have to have Iberia. Following the Carthaginian conquest campaign through Italy would be really cool to see. And maybe even there could be a turning point where, if it is a Carthaginian assassin, he sees what Hannibal's doing to the people of Italy, and this assassin's like, oh, hell no, and then goes to Rome and warns them, and maybe there could be a cool twist like that.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of interesting things you can do with the duality of two cities against each other, because in all of the cities that we've seen in AC, the closest one since AC1 is Boston and New York. When the British were occupying Boston, the Americans had New York. But two cities against each other, like in the case of AC1, was a very cool dynamic, because you'd hear the preachers spouting propaganda on one side or the other in both cases, and I thought that was really neat.
And two separate republics at the same time as well, instead of like monarchies or anything. Adds even an extra layer. Another city that we could actually have, which would be pretty interesting, would be that Hamilcar Barca set up while he was campaigning in Iberia, and he actually named his capital city of Iberia Barcino, and today we may just know that as Barcelona. So I think it probably could be cool to see Barcelona in its very, very early days.
Oh, that's so cool, yeah.
When it was still just the capital of what was known as the Barca Empire.
Yeah, and Barcino is a silver mining town. That's actually really interesting. Could have the mines in there.
Yeah, that could offer potentially another set piece or another location as well, which would be
A lot of the silver working that's going on.
super
In
interesting.
In terms of gameplay, though, you also have a great new opportunity. Aftermath, like you said, we were talking about boats, and I think you wouldn't get anything along the lines of AC4 or AC Rogue. But in terms of a navigational tool, to have Roman ships, Navy. Let me take a look and see what Roman ships actually looked like back then. They seem to all be flat-decked ships, sort of like a trireme, where you could have the ships mainly as a navigational tool going between the Italian Peninsula, North Africa, and the Iberian Peninsula. But I think it'd be cool that if it worked sort of like with AC4, you can just jump from one ship to another and fight off some Carthaginians and then take their stuff, or Romans, whatever. Yeah. But boats would be a welcome addition, sort of like how we talked about that with the what was the name of the Opium Wars with the naval junks.
Yeah.
Cool
that could be cool. Like a smaller naval empire, smaller naval country facing off a larger naval empire because of Carthage also controlled basically every single Mediterranean island, including Sardinia, Corsica, and Sicily. So they had quite a bit more control over the seas, and so, as you said, it could be very fun to play as budding naval power.
Yeah.
That could be. And in terms of weapons and things like that, basically, I think Carthage and Rome had similar tech in that regard. Just like a short sword, which I've forgotten the name of now, and spears and things that would
Gladius.
That's it. That's the one.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that the assassins had a foothold in Rome thanks to good old Brutus. So perhaps they were there quite a bit longer, and perhaps they were also in Carthage. It could be very, very interesting. We could relay the Shroud into that as well, because we know that was in Rome at the time of Brutus, and so maybe it was there a bit longer. Oh, I just really like the idea. I really like this time period. I really like the idea of having an AC taken here. Instead of, especially instead of a Rome at the height of its power when they don't really have anyone to face off against for the most part. I think that either in the early days, like the Punic Wars, or as they're collapsing, when Rome's capital was Constantinople, could be really interesting instead of just being a super powerful big stick.
So today, if this is the day that things are actually happening, is when the podcast goes up, and also when we release Part 5, Sequence 5, Descent of Assassin's Creed Legacies, which we talked about 2 long episodes ago. Lawson and I have been posting parts 1 through 5 on the subreddit and sharing them around on Twitter, and listening to all the feedback you've been leaving. And it's been a fun process of every time we post something, we'll start putting things in. So Lawson, what has it been for you, the kind of release process of showing off Legacies?
It's been pretty interesting, very fun to write, but releasing it has been pretty satisfying because, there was a lot of work involved preparing it, so to put it out there is really nice. We've been receiving a lot of feedback and comments from our readers, and we are going to basically take all of the feedback that we've heard and consider it very heavily, and then feedback that we agree with will be incorporated into what will kind of be a final edition, if you will, which we will release probably within a week of dropping the 5th sequence.
Depends on when we can finish it. But yeah, the feedback has been, a lot of the time, it's something where it's like, oh, yeah, that's obvious. How do we miss that? Sometimes we need to think, okay, how would we do that? And some things are like, well, sorry, but no. But a lot of it overwhelmingly has been very, very helpful feedback that we've been able to use. So the main concern was that the premise is ridiculous. So we thought, yeah, okay. So we fixed it. We've added a plot device that we think you guys will like that also is indicative of something else, but that's secret and will come later.
Yeah, we wanted to give a more believable reason why these 3 characters are coming together, because the biggest response that we heard was that the reasons for why Connor's in France and Arno's hunting Shay and Shay's hunting Arno. It was a little too flimsy, and so we believe we've fixed that.
But you will see that next week, sometime when we decide to release it. It'll be on Twitter in EPUB format. Is that right, Lawson?
Yes, we'll be trying to make it more accessible as an ebook, so something you can download onto a reader like a Kindle or a Nook. Now, the marathon is still going as strong as ever. We are on day 21, and we have just wrapped up Assassin's Creed 2, which is, by many accounts, considered one of the best games of the franchise. So what we're going to do for this segment is we're just going to kind of have a group discussion on certain things about AC2 and what we liked and disliked about it. There's lots of stuff to talk about. For me, the thing that I always want to talk about when it comes to Assassin's Creed 2, one of the biggest strengths of the game's storytelling, in my opinion, is how good it is at showing versus telling. Because in the beginning of the game, the first sequence is basically the player becoming acquainted with Ezio's family. And the way that they did it made all of those characters very memorable. Years after playing the game for the first time, I still remembered who Federico and Petruccio and Claudio were. Because it introduced us to those characters, and it made us feel close to them so that it could tragically rip them from our hearts and make us empathize with Ezio in that way. Later games got really bad at this. Assassin's Creed Unity, I don't remember what Monsieur de la Serre looked like. I don't remember a single line of dialogue that he said. I don't remember if he had more than 3 lines of dialogue. I didn't care about him. They wanted us to really go, oh, well, de la Serre is dead, so we'll feel bad for Arno, but they didn't give us time to actually care about the character. I feel like Arno and Elise's relationship was the same way, in that they kind of just told us it existed rather than show it to us and let us be attached to Elise the same way Arno was.
Yeah, the storytelling in AC2 is definitely, I think it's its strongest point, and basically I think most people in the AC community can probably tell you exactly why. I really like how well, I talked about this a bit in my AC2 review, but I really like how well it kind of intertwines with the history of the time period. Like taking part, or stopping the assassination of the Medicis at the hand of the parties, and becoming best friends with Lorenzo from that, and being involved in the siege of Forlì, and all these different historical events are just like so much fun. And when the few times that AC2's story does falter, I think that the history is always there to back it up.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a kind of scale for historical integration. And on like the far side of it, you have AC3, where like everything is historically there and there's all these different historical events that are thrown in. Less for story purposes and more to be like, hey, here's a thing that happened. And then on the other end of that scale, you have a game like Unity, which has little to no actual relationship to the French Revolution and just has like a couple of throwaway characters like de Sade and Robespierre. And I think AC2 sits perfectly in the middle of that scale.
Yep.
Because it has a manageable cast of characters, I think, because you actually get to know them. Whereas with AC3 and also AC Unity, it's like you see de Sade twice, and they built him so much. They built him up so much in all the pre-release footage. Whereas you actually get to know personally the characters in AC2.
One thing I really like about AC2's villains in particular, and in this story, is they're all given like a lead-in. It's like you see them all like a sequence or two before you actually go after them, and you get a sense of how they interact with other characters and what makes them a bad person while you're going after them. Whereas like in Unity, it's very much like I saw this guy in a vision at the end of the last sequence, so I'm going to kill him now.
Yeah, it's really poorly strung together in Unity. What makes AC2 work a lot better than the other games, I think, is because it's two families, and that's so much easier to keep track of. There's the Pazzi and there's the Barbarigo. And you have, with the Pazzi, you have Jacopo, Francesco, and Vieri. And with the Barbarigo, you have Silvio,
Marco.
And Marco, and
Emilio.
Emilio. So you've got all those guys. It's much easier to keep track of. You can remember them. I mean, hell, the Pazzi all dress the same anyway.
Yeah.
But Krakenway, definitely to your point, I think they're introduced so much better than in any of the other games. So the villains are actually memorable. I don't remember half of the people who I killed in AC Unity. I honestly don't really care. But it handled so well.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. One part that I really like, and I think it mirrors the story perfectly, is how these characters are like tied to the cities that they live in. Aries, I know that you wanted to mention the cities.
Yeah, so my favorite part of AC2, the graphics may not hold up, the gameplay may not hold up, the story always holds up, and the city always holds up, no matter, I think, what your perspective is, because the cities are just unbelievably unique and well designed above everything else. So Florence and Venice, and San Gimignano and Forlì as well, are, I think, some of the best made cities in an Assassin's Creed game, because it makes such good use of the landmarks in the games.
Yeah.
And in other games like Boston, New York, you don't really have a lot to go on. Havana was great in AC4, but there's really one big building, and then there's the governor's mansion, but that's really it. Whereas with AC4, or with AC2, you always have buildings, You can see the Frari Church in Venice. You can always see San Marco. You can see l'Arsenale wherever you go. And in Florence, you have the Duomo, Santa Croce, Santa Maria Novella, the bridge, Ponte Vecchio, and Piazza della Signoria. And it's a city that the cities work so well. They're so beautifully designed. And I feel like I actually know how to navigate them because they're so well laid out that the districts actually feel different. So the military district in Venice feels so much different from things on the west side of the canal. And one thing I was talking to a couple people about a couple days ago was the way that districts are designed in the games. So in Florence, there's not really a lot of districtization going on. There's just the Arno River and then what's north of that and what's south of that. But with Venice, the Grand Canal is sort of moved a little bit from where it is in real life, and it's done to perfect effect. So when you first get to Venice, you're on the west side of the Grand Canal in the first sequence. Next sequence, you go east. So you're east of the Grand Canal up to San Marco. And then after that, you go to the Dorsoduro district, which is south of the Grand Canal. And then the sequence after that, you go east further of San Marco. And then the final sequence, you go north of the Grand Canal. So the Grand Canal is a built-in boundary for where you are in the actual sequences. So the invisible walls don't really stick out as much as they do in, say, Florence. But I think the reason Venice is so well designed is because it incorporates the Grand Canal into how you navigate the city and how you're blocked off from going to certain places, and it encourages you to stay in one spot and explore a little bit more.
Yeah, I definitely think that's an improvement upon AC1. Probably one of the largest improvements upon AC1 that AC2 has. Like, in AC1, all the cities were pretty much the same, and I know that part of that would be like the historical time period and the architecture of the area.
Yeah.
But the only difference was the music, the color of the guards, and like the color, because they all had that weird hue over them. Like Damascus has a brown hue. Jerusalem was actually pretty normal, and then
greenish.
Had like
Jerusalem was very green. And AC2, the cities do well, not so much the cities, but like if you go to Forlì or Monteriggioni, there is a clear greenishness to everything.
Yeah.
I actually liked that kind of the color palette switched out in different cities in AC1 because it made them each very distinct. The architecture was pretty similar, like you said, but I never felt like Acre and Damascus were anything like each other because they had the different colors and the different atmospheres and the different voices in the streets.
I think that added to it.
Yeah.
I think that added to it, and it was. But I think it just shows that it was necessary that they had to do that because they couldn't actually be more subtle with it. So they actually just threw a massive hue over your face so that they felt different. And that was really
even
where they could.
Without a filter, if you're in Forlì, San Gimignano, or Florence, or Venice, you know immediately which city you're in with just a second of being in there, which I think is really, really good game design. So like with Nassau and, say, Kingston and Havana, they're pretty distinct. Boston and New York are pretty much the same. You honestly can't tell the difference unless you really study it.
New York is a bit more brick, whereas Boston is more wood, but
you need to look at it.
That's way too detailed. Like
from any single screenshot, you know immediately which city you're in when it comes to AC2 from just a single look.
This is actually something I mentioned in my review. Like I said, from Venice's tall buildings and canals to Florence's monuments and cathedrals to San Jimmy John's towers, every city,
gosh darn it,
every city is memorable. Every city is different, and not just by color. Like you can tell there's obvious differences in, like as you said, like screenshots, anything you can tell immediately by the architecture, because they're all so different, yet they all so fit in Renaissance Italy. It's a little bit crazy how much time and effort they put into that.
And it's designed so accurately because they said they had the actual game maps when they were building, or the actual city maps when they were designing the game. And since I was in Italy so recently, it was actually kind of fun because you're in, say, Florence and you're at the Duomo. If you look to your right, Piazza della Signoria is right there, and I'm like, bullshit, it's further away. But still, seeing everything, how it's put together, is really cool, because say the Arsenal is like an hour walk from San Marco, but it's 2 feet away in the game. But still, it's such a wonderfully done example of contracting a city to fit inside the game world. An article I read a long time ago described AC2 as the perfect way to do virtual tourism. And the reason I'm so glad I have this playthrough now is that on my Mac, whenever I want to just go to Florence or go to Venice, I can just fire up AC2 and just be there and feel right in it.
Yeah.
And it really feels like you're there,
think that
it's just great.
Yeah, I think that definitely part of that, and what plays into the city's feeling so amazing is definitely the ambient music.
Absolutely.
The kids' music is just like legendary, as anyone in the community will tell you. And
especially in Venice. I personally think that Venice has the most beautiful music in any AC game.
Tour of Venice is my single favorite piece of music in AC.
Wow, yeah. So, are there anything that you guys don't like in AC2 that you guys want to talk about?
Okay.
That was quick.
Yeah, so there's a few things. Now, I pointed these out in my review, and it's been a while since I played the game last, until I wrote this, and it's there's a few things that stood out to me looking at it, but I still think the good things have definitely overwhelmed the bad things massively. But there are a few points, like, for example, random, inconsistent, and constant QTEs in the middle of cutscenes, which caused me to make a sad Leonardo.
Let me tell you about that. So I'm playing on my Mac because my PlayStation is full of Splinter Cell and Rogue. That's all it can hold, my PS3. It's pretty sad. But I'm on keyboard because keyboard and mouse is freaking impossible when I'm getting like 20 frames per second. It's rough. So I always knew that when I played on PS3, the Leonardo hug for me always showed up as triangle. So I had my hand on the Eagle Vision button, but then it came up as press the open hand button, and my other hand was in my lap. So I was like, oh shit. So I had to like reach over my desk and just hammer on the shift key, and I barely got it. That was the most tense moment in the entire game, because I was like, okay, I know it's going to be the Eagle Vision button, but no, it caught me off guard, and that was really scary.
I missed it and reloaded immediately.
I actually made it this time, and this was the first time I did. You know what really stood out to me is something that I don't like about this game, is that the combat takes a long time.
Yeah, it's long.
It feels really slow.
I actually kind of like the combat, but maybe it's because I played AC1 just before this, and basically Assassin's Creed 2, Assassin's Creed 1 through Revelations basically are just the same iterations upon the same combat with slight improvements each time. I actually really like AC2's combat.
Because AC Brotherhood and Revelations keep the same kind of combat, but having the
kill
combo kills makes it feel faster.
Adds a lot to it.
The thing with the combat is the difference between AC2 and AC1 in my mind is AC2 and AC1 are both very slow combat games. But AC1, the combat's very dangerous. So if you're overwhelmed, you are absolutely screwed. But with AC2, since you have the passive deflect, if you have 10 guys around you, you can just stay there and kill them all. So in AC1, the emphasis is really on escaping if you're in a tough situation, whereas AC2 you can pretty much wait it out, which is why I think the combat's a little bit weak compared to AC1, is because it's actually easier to stay alive, so the emphasis isn't as much on escaping. But yeah.
All right. Another point that I have is the DLC in AC2. Now, I understand the reasoning behind it. I understand why it's like that, but it still feels, and I know how cheap it is, it still feels kind of scummy to me. Like, so for everyone who doesn't know, there are two very important sequences in the game, the Battle of Forlì and Bonfire of the Vanities, which are both incredibly important historically and for the growth of Ezio. These were cut in late development because they couldn't finish them. And so instead of just going from Venice to Rome, they instead leave in a gap and leave Ezio to continue his story through that, which is kind of disorienting, and especially originally when I first played the games, and then they were just like, oh, these corrupted sequences. And then I later found out that they actually then released those sequences a month later as $4 and $5 DLC to go and download. And while it's very cheap, it still feels kind of like scummy to me and doesn't quite sit right with me that they were originally cut from the game, and instead of kind of like working around that, they just left. They just basically just carved out the chunk and decided they'd finish it later.
Yeah, I mean, Battle of Forlì definitely feels like that, because you go to Forlì before, but there's really nothing to do there in the story at all.
Yeah.
It's kind of confusing why you're there at all. So that one definitely feels like it was just dropped from the game, because it's a place you go to. It doesn't introduce any new gameplay concepts or anything. Bonfire of the Vanities, I think, can get away with it a little more because it gives you a new area. There's at least one new gameplay mechanic, which is the
there's black-ass springboards.
Yeah. That one-off addition to the free-running mechanics in AC2. And then just the structure of the missions, I feel, is much more DLC-oriented than Battle of Forlì, because Battle of Forlì is like just a story sequence, and then Bonfire of the Vanities feels more like a have fun assassinating people sequence. Like, it was just like, here's some fun stuff, here's lots of the one fun thing.
When I played the game for the first time, I had bought a version that came with them included. So I didn't know they were DLC. I just thought they were sequences in the game. And when I played sequence 12, I thought, okay, we're getting close to the end here. You know, Ezio has his Apple of Eden, and now the next step in the story is to go take out Rodrigo Borgia. And then it's like, ha, just kidding, you lost the apple. Now go do some bullshit stuff in Forlì, and then do this Savonarola stuff. I thought it was like a weird way to pad the length of the game, because it felt so extraneous. So when you look at it from the other perspective of, you know, I didn't have it first, but then I bought it later, and wow, these sequences felt really integral to the story. I feel like they don't feel integral to the story at all when you just play it through, not even knowing that they're extra content.
There's one speech that stands out, though. It's at the end of the Bonfire of the Vanities.
Yes.
That one speech, which is very important. If you are like me, who heard it for the first time years after playing AC2 on YouTube, and you're just like, why the fuck? This wasn't in the game. I don't remember this. Oh, it was in the DLC that I didn't get because I didn't know it was a thing. And it's kind of like disappointing that I didn't get to experience that, like, I don't know, some others would when they played like you for the first time all the way through.
Yeah, AC has a bad habit of putting important stuff in the DLC.
Yeah. Revelations, cough cough, worst offender.
As opposed to having a DLC like Dead Kings, which adds nothing of value to the story at all whatsoever. But
the thing about the speech is, I have a bit of an interesting take on how AC2 actually ends. So I was playing Bonfire of the Vanities just last night, going through it, One of my favorite sequences is all of AC because we talked about this just then. It's just, a straight romp through Florence, just going back. And for a story context, I think it's really cool because you have Ezio go to, his home, really, Firenze, I should say. And he builds it up when he's with the Medici, and then he comes back, and it's wrecked. And you hear people in the streets like, "Oh, I want the assassin to come back. The times were better when he was around." So I really felt like, oh wow, the people actually, they know who I am, they need me, and I felt like empowered to go do all this stuff. But when Ezio gives his speech at the very end after killing Savonarola when he's being burned, I feel like that right there honestly could have been the end of the game, because after that you go to the vault, you go to Rome, you fight up Roderick Borscht, I like to call him Rodrigo Borgia, and then you let him live. He runs away. You go inside the vault, talk to Minerva, Space Lady. Desmond's like, what the fuck? He fights some guards. Vidic shows up, and then he just kind of leaves. All of that other stuff feels like it should have been in the beginning of AC Brotherhood instead, with all the Rome stuff. So I honestly feel like it's all kind of... It doesn't really matter in the context of AC Brotherhood story, because Ezio's speech is a reconciliation of his family dying in Florence, him being betrayed, coming to realize what freedom really means, and saying, don't follow me or anyone else. You have the responsibility to take democracy into your hands and actually make something good of this city, and don't let people like Savonarola take that away from you. Then he walks away, meets up with Machiavelli, Mario, La Volpe, and Paola, and then walks out. And I feel like that is so much more of a satisfying ending than the wackiness that is the actual end of AC2. That I honestly stopped playing. I'm not even going to finish AC2 after this, because that is the end of the game in my mind. Is that speech is it?
I think that's an interesting perspective, but I have to admit I would have been really disappointed if the game had ended without any real confrontation between Ezio and Rodrigo Borgia. Now,
well, I think if you put it if you just play AC Brotherhood right afterwards and just kind of lump that all into the beginning of Brotherhood, I think it would have worked much better. Obviously, you can't really do that, but I
just wish there would have been a better reason for Ezio to leave Rodrigo Borgia alive.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of comes to terms
like,
with it in his speech in the bonfire. He's like, I saw my family die, but I can't really change that now. So he says, killing me won't bring my family back. I'm done.
This has been episode 24 of the Animus podcast. Thanks so much for joining us, Turul.
No problem. Thanks for having me. I like being on here, so bring me back.
Yeah, we'll do, definitely. It's been great talking to you about these different topics. And where can everyone find you?
I think we talked about it earlier, but you can find me on Twitter at AC_Turul. You can find me on Reddit at Turul9. I have a DeviantArt page at AC Turul. I'll probably be on that Assassin's Council site if it ever worked. But yeah.
Don't worry. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole just yet.
Yeah.
All right. So this has been episode 24. Next week we have something very special planned, but
hopefully,
exactly. Hopefully, we're not going to talk about it just yet in case it doesn't work out. But it should be fun either way. I'm Aftermath 1231. That's Aries 2596. That's McCracken Way. Is it 6'9" or is it 9'6"? I keep forgetting.
9'6".
9'6". So I think I got it
I'm
right.
not 70 years old.
Yeah.
What would that be? That'd make
we're all on Twitter. We're all on the AC subreddit, which is reddit.com/r/Assassin's Creed or assassinscreed.reddit.com. And we're all available there. You can send us an email about the podcast if you want to be a guest or would like to send us a question. You can contact us that way. That's animusislandpodcast@gmail.com. And I think that's all we have to say. So we will see you next week.